Hello, my friends. In this video, we will be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and G25 results of a Bulgar from Samovedene in Bulgaria. You might, if you are paying attention, you might be able to spot that the word Bulgaria, the name of the country, actually has the letters Bulgar in it. That's because the name of the country Bulgaria derives from the name of the ethnonym Bulgar, which was a Turkic group that used to inhabit this region. Bulgarians are Slavic people, but they are named after the Turkic people who lived in this region, which is very, very interesting. The Bulgarian language falls into the Slavic language family. It's very closely related to my own language, Russian, because the Russian language it was sort of formed with a lot of influence from Old Church Slavonic, which is um, influenced by Bulgarian, but even though Bulgarians speak a Slavic language, they are very much influenced genetically by these Bulgars, by these Turkic people, Bulgars. And Bulgars, these Turkic people, left a huge genetic influence. They left a huge genetic imprint on the Bulgarian nation, and they also left a impact on the history of Bulgaria and an impact on the name of the country itself. So the location of this country is right here. This is where it is located. It's north of Greece and Turkey, south of Romania, east of Serbia, west of the Black Sea. This is where it's located in the Balkans. And regarding this sample's mitochondrial DNA is U5, and its Y DNA is actually QYP789. And in case you don't know where that falls into the wider Q1 branch. Q1 branch is very widespread among Native Americans, so this is something that connects this Bulgarian individual to various Native American groups in the American subcontinent. In the American continent, it is this haplogroup, very common haplogroup among the Native Americans. And this Bulgarian individual, this Bulgar, also has this haplogroup, this paternal lineage, which connects him to various Native Americans. All right. Regarding the coordinates that are on illustrative DNA, it looks like they are closest to Balkan Turks from Dili Balkan Turks from Kirkali, various Balkan Turks, followed by Mishar Tatars, Moldovans, and then various Balkan Turks once again, Romanians, Roma from Barcelona, and Gagauz. Let's see what we get with the simulated G25 that I've simulated using this raw DNA to sim tool on Explore Your DNA. It looks like here they are also similar to various Balkan Turks, followed by Tatar Mishar, which is very similar to what we see here. Tatar Mishar also show up here with a similar distance. Moldovans also show up there. Romanians and Gagauz also show up as well. So we see pretty much similar results with the simulated G25 as well. Modeling this individual with 4 populations. Actually, let's try 5 populations and distance column to 1. This might be an interesting model. And we get, let's see, let's wait a little bit for the model to finish. So we get a model that looks like this, and the model is 38% Tatar Kazan. So this is the sort of Turkic or Onogundur Bulgar admixture. Onogundur Bulgar, so like these Volga Bulgars, resemble Kazan Tatars. There is 22.2% Turkish Balikesir, so this is sort of Anatolian Turkish admixture. 19.6% Castilla y Leon Spanish, which very interesting Mediterranean admixture. So there is some Mediterranean admixture here as well. 13.6% Italian from Trentino Alto Adige. Very interesting. I don't know what to make of that. So there is some Mediterranean, Western Mediterranean admixture as well. And 6.6% Moksha, which is kind of like, I guess, vaguely Eastern European admixture that this Bulgar might have picked up along the way as they traveled from Central Asia into Bulgaria. All right, let's move on to this individual's results with my trait predictor. And first, we're going to move on to their ethnic calculator results. This might be very interesting to see. And here they score closest to Turkic Caspian steppe, DA14D2, which is very interesting. Followed by that is Assyrian and Turkish and Hispanic from Latinx Hispanic. Very typical results for somebody who is Turkic. I'm very pleased that it accurately pointed out that they're similar to Turkic from the Caspian steppe. The ethnogenesis of Bulgars is very similar to this sample. This sample actually scores very similar to various Bulgars. Yamne from Kalmykia, very interesting as well. Corridware, speaking as 2, very interesting once again. And the closest two-way mixture is a mixture of Sarmatian from Urals plus Russians modern and Assyrian plus Turkic Caspian steppe. Russians modern plus Israelite and Turkish plus Bel Bikr. All right, very interesting model. I'm not really sure what to make of it, but this is what it is with 464 S&Ps. Let's see what this individual scores for Nasha code calculator results, what they look like, what phenotype they have, and what phenotypes they score for the phenotype oracle. So it looks like for the Nasha code calculator results, they are scoring hazel eye color, hazel or brown eye color. So they're scoring 53% likelihood of hazel eyes and 34% likelihood of brown eyes. Most likely they have hazel eye color, but brown eye color comes second at 34%. They definitely do not have blue eyes. They definitely do not have dark brown eyes. When it comes to green eyes or blue eyes with a neighbor center, that is sort of probable, but it's not really, not too much. For hair color likelihood distribution, most likely and very probably this individual has dark brown hair. Light brown hair is not very possible, and black hair is not very possible, but it is sort of possible, but not too much. When it comes to any other hair color, such as dark blonde or light blonde or red hair, that is completely out of the picture. When it comes to skin color likelihood distribution, this individual, once again, very precise prediction, definitely has olive or Mediterranean skin tone. When it comes to light brown or white or palest or dark brown skin, that is pretty much completely out of the picture. Definitely has olive skin tone. And for hair texture, this person definitely has curly or wavy or straight hair. Probably does not have kinky hair. Although actually it's not that precise of a prediction. There is 9% for kinky hair. It's not a very precise prediction. Looks like this file could be a little bit higher quality and we could get a better prediction if it was a little bit better of a file. For nose shape, looks like they are scoring higher for snub nose shape, 59.9% for snub nose shape, 40.08 for Greek nose shape, but it's not very definite. Like they could have either, to be honest. They could have Greek or snub. They could have either nose shape in reality, but there is a slight predisposition to snub nose shape. And for coloring related variants found in the file, looks like they have heterozygous for BH3, heterozygous for blue eye haplotype 2, no blue eye haplotype 1, which is very, very interesting. Actually, they most likely do have blue eye haplotype 1 because they have two light color variants here. And these are also very, very strongly linked to blue eye haplotype 1. So we could actually say they do have blue eye haplotype 1 based on these two genotypes. And they have any light color variants in MC1R? They do not have any light color variants in MC1R. But they do have some other genotypes that predispose them to ginger hair, because I remember them scoring much higher for red hair than for light blonde or dark blonde. So they do have some genotypes that predispose them to ginger hair. All right. Let's see the phenotype oracle results. What phenotypes this Bulgar resembles most. So it looks like the phenotype closest to it is this Alpinid, kind of a sort of a vaguely dark colored French looking phenotype. Followed by that is Volgid, also pretty dark colored. Followed by that is Alpinid, but with lighter eye color. And for the two-way mixtures of phenotypes, it looks like the closest mixture phenotype is a mixture of 50% this, which is like also kind of vaguely South Asian, plus 50% this, which is Nordic. So the reason they score something like such a mixture is because the South Asian is much darker and the Nordic is much lighter, and this mixture of really dark plus really light creates a intermediate result. The second mixture is a mixture of 50% this plus 50% this. Here we see both of these groups are rather intermediate in color, so the result is not as extreme. And for the third mixture, once again, extremely dark group for the top and extremely light group for the bottom. And we see a similar pattern with the fourth mixture and the fifth mixture. So it looks like there's definitely some South Asian-like stuff that they're scoring for the phenotype mixtures. Definitely quite interesting. A little bit exotic in a phenotype. But if you look at the closest phenotype for the one way, is this Alpinid, and then it's this Volgid, then it's this Alpinid with lighter eye color and skin color too. This looks like it has lighter skin color as well. All right, let's see what it scores for the biomarkers panel. predisposition to various biomarkers. Looks like they have below average level of vitamin D, above average level of LDL cholesterol, which is kind of creeping into the unhealthy territory, below average level of HDL cholesterol, which is also bad, above average level of glucose levels, which is kind of bad as well, above average level of hemoglobin, average blood pressure, and below average level of iron in the blood. So we already know they are not going to score that much for the hemochromatosis variants. Below average level of sex hormone binding globulin, below average level of red blood cell count in blood, below average for base pairs, so not that long for telomere length, which is kind of bad as well. So shorter lifespan, and below average for height, so below average height. All right, quite interesting. Let's see what they score for the polygenic risk scores. So for the polygenic risk scores, looks like they have above average risk of kidney stones, definitely much higher risk for hemoglobin E disease, um, below average risk for migraine, average risk for lupus, very low risk for gout, low risk for thyroid cancer, average risk for eczema, average risk for everything related to congenital glaucoma. I don't see any high risk for that. Um, above average risk for polycystic ovary syndrome, slightly above average risk for cataracts, very high risk for age-related macular degeneration. Let's look that up, actually. Let's look that up in the file. AMD. So it looks like they have some genotypes for increased risk of AMD, like this, for example. And this, so they definitely have some genotypes for increased risk of AMD. That makes sense why they scored the way they did. Average odds for rheumatoid arthritis, below average odds for Tourette's, slightly above average odds for epilepsy, average odds for asthma, average for leukemia, below average for vitiligo, average for myopia, below average for corneal astigmatism, above average for primary biliary cirrhosis, average for stroke, very high odds for male pattern hair loss. So let's look that up actually. Let's see what they have for male pattern hair loss panel. Let's see what they score for that. So here, this is an AR gene, and they have the GG genotype, which leads to high odds of baldness, which is kind of typical for Europeans and West Eurasians in general. So that's kind of okay. That's expected. That's expected to see. They have all these genotypes for increased risk of male pattern baldness. So yeah, it makes sense. They don't have any alleles for decreased odds of baldness. So it makes sense that they're scoring higher for the odds of baldness. And they are also a European, a West Eurasian. So West Eurasians tend to score much higher for this panel. They're scoring below average for the odds of atrial fibrillation. They're scoring below average for their odds of deep vein thrombosis, but that's based on 1S&P. They're scoring below average for unipolar depression, spot on average for bipolar type 1, slightly above average for schizophrenia, above average for type 2 diabetes, and very high for type 1 diabetes. So this is actually one of the highest things they scored for, type 1 diabetes. Definitely very interesting. I want to scroll up and see asthma. What did they score for asthma? A little bit above average for asthma. What did they score for the other thing? There's something else there as well that also relies on the HLA panel. Okay. All right. Alzheimer's, they scored below average. Definitely very low odds for Alzheimer's and very low odds for multiple sclerosis. Definitely very good to see that. They score no risk variance for breast cancer, which is really good. They score 11 risk variance for testicular cancer of 18, which is 11 risk variance for testicular cancer of 18, which is let's see. They have 2 risk variants and all the important variations of Kittel G, so they're quite cooked when it comes to risk variants in testicular cancer and Kittel G. But I feel like it's not that big of a deal because like testicular cancer is a very modern concern. And in what time period is this from? Actually, let's look it up. It's 9th century Bulgaria. So 9th century Bulgaria, testicular cancer probably isn't that big a concern. So probably not that big of a deal. All right. They probably don't have to worry too much about testicular cancer, to be honest. Celiac disease, 3 risk variants out of 8, which is pretty typical. No risk variants for GSS. Crohn's disease, 3 risk variants, but none of them are marked as important. Riefenstein's, no risk variants. Parkinson's, no risk variants. Gilbert syndrome, 3 common risk variants, pretty typical stuff. Basal cell carcinoma, no risk variants. Peutz-Jeghers, no risk variants. Hypoplasia, no risk variants. No risk variants anywhere here. Really good to see. The only risk variants that we find are common, so that's really good to see. The only risk variants we find for Trichocolins or Brugada are common. I don't see anything uncommon here, so all that is pretty typical to see. All of these panels are really good, looking really good. So the only things we have to really watch out for is type 1 diabetes. And I guess male pattern hair loss, but that's not really a concern too much. It's not a health issue. It's really not a health issue. Okay. All right. And now let's see what they score for the monogenic traits portion of the result. So it looks like for the warrior versus warrior result, which is based on genotypes in COMT, MAOA, and MAOB genes, they are definitely predisposed to warrior phenotype, which means slower dopamine reuptake and higher dopamine levels, therefore lower stress resiliency, and some disadvantage in stressful situations, advantage in motivation and attention-related tasks. Definitely quite interesting. It's a very European genotype to have, very European genetic predisposition. When it comes to dopamine D2, they have a predisposition to intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. Pretty typical stuff for people in general. Very typical genotype, but for Europeans typically score less dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. Non-Europeans typically score higher. Looks like they have a genotype that's very uncommon, at least to 7 times increased risk of DSPS. I'm not really sure what that is. Looks like they don't have any pathogenic genotypes in P, R, and P. Really good to see. A genotype for less extreme alcoholism and SLC 6A4. Really good to see. And for levels of 5-HT and serotonin, which has to do with, literally serotonin. It's labeled as the happiness hormone, and that has to do with odds of stuff like depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. It looks like they have a predisposition to intermediate levels of 5-HT, so it looks like they have intermediate odds for stuff like depression, anxiety. Pretty good to see. For autism, and looks like for autism, they actually have lower odds of autism. Predisposition to lower odds of autism, which is really good to see that. So that's pretty cool. All right. For lactose persistence, they do not carry the European lactose persistence mutation, so we can assume they probably do not tolerate lactose all too well. But then again, a lot of people don't have the European lactose persistence mutation. Like, for example, myself, I don't have the European lactose persistence mutation, but I tolerate lactose pretty well. I mean, it's not that I'm phrasing it wrong. I'm phrasing it completely wrong. It's not tolerating lactose. It's lactase is the enzyme that you need to digest milk. And I don't have the mutation, but I think I have the enzyme because I can digest milk pretty well. And I don't know. It's like processed milk that doesn't have the enzyme in it. I can digest it pretty well as well. So I think this trait of being lactose persistent versus lactose intolerant, I think is just so much more polygenic than just this MCM6 and LCT genotypes. Like, I think it's just so extremely polygenic that it's just very difficult to predict with just these 4 genotypes that my trait predictor looks for. So I think you can be lactose persistent without having these alleles, is what I'm saying. For example, I've seen this very, very frequently where people are lactose persistent, but they don't have any alleles for that. So I'm not saying that this individual isn't lactose persistent or is. I'm not saying that this individual definitely is lactose persistent, but I'm just saying that we can't say for sure that just because he doesn't have the European lactose persistence mutations, that he definitely cannot digest milk. It's not so cut and dry in this case. For empathy gene, looks like they have a predisposition to average level of empathy, average or higher actually, based on these 5 SNPs in OXTR region. Very definitely quite interesting. For diabetes, remember they were scoring really high for type 1 diabetes. So they have this genotype for slight increase in risk of type 1 diabetes, high odds of type 1 diabetes, and a genotype for high odds. I'm definitely going to be interested to see their score for HLA gene panel. No risk variance for hemochromatosis panel, all right, quite good to see. No risk variance for Alzheimer's and APOE, really good to see. Multiple sclerosis, no risk variance for MS and HLA, really good to see. Cardiovascular disease panel looks like they have a predisposition to higher or intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues. So based on this cardiovascular disease panel, they have a predisposition to higher or intermediate odds of cardiovascular risk issues. Definitely quite interesting. For facial morphology gene panel, they don't have any East Asian genotypes in EDAR, so their genotypes in EDAR are all very European. They have a genotype for intermediate odds of protruding nasal bridge. They have a genotype for larger nose size, slightly thinner eyebrows, and lower odds of missing teeth. They don't have micropenis. He has impaired muscle performance, likely endurance athlete rather than strength or power athlete. And he also does not have the Asian flusher mutation and lower odds of alcoholism and normal risk of esophageal cancer. No risk variance for pain hypersensitivity out of 4 total in SCN9A. Pretty typical stuff. Risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications is slightly above average here. All right. And he is a carrier of one CYP1A2 .IF allele, which means he has faster metabolism of caffeine. Definitely quite interesting here. Okay. All right. No risk variance for familiar Mediterranean fever. Not a carrier of cutaneous albinism type. Any mutations for cutaneous albinism. He does not have. He has a genotype in MTHFR for normal homocysteine levels, which is really good to see. But he also has a genotype for high odds of neurotube defects and a genotype for impaired folate metabolism. I feel like this might contribute to them scoring very high for the risk of high homocysteine levels. They also have another genotype here, which is very uncommon, that leads to lower blood pressure. All right. Okay. For rare diseases and traits panel, let's look at that. So they have a genotype for high risk of glaucoma. Definitely quite interesting. They have a genotype that leads to 20 times increased risk of ankylosing spondylitis, but you know what that is already. It's not very uncommon. I've seen this frequently, and it occurs in maybe 2 or 3% of people of European ancestry, so it's not really uncommon. He has a two risk variance in this variation, which leads to 4.6 times increased risk of eosinophilic esophagitis, which is also quite frequent. He has this genotype which leads to significantly increased risk of RA, rheumatoid arthritis, and systemic sclerosis. Very interesting. And that seems to be it. I don't see any other rare conditions that he's predisposed to. For celiac disease, it looks like he has a genotype for somewhat increased autoimmune disorder risk. One HLA-DRB1 risk allele here. So yeah, it looks like he probably is gonna score high on the HLA risk panel, which would contribute to a high score for diabetes type 1. All right, he's got 2 APOB risk variants from familiar hypercholesteremia out of 2 total, which is kind of concerning. All right, and Crohn's disease, nothing was found. Canavan syndrome, no risk variants. HIV and AIDS panel, he's got 2 protective variants here, which leads to 90% reduction in HIV viral load. HLA gene panel actually does not look that bad. He still has a predisposition to lower odds of autoimmune disease. So it looks like the HLA risk variants weren't really that enough to contribute to a scoring higher odds for autoimmune disease. So HLA gene panel is still looking pretty good. He still has a predisposition to lower odds of autoimmune disease. I think I skipped over the vitiligo panel. Let's scroll up to that a little bit. Yeah, he does not have any risk variance for vitiligo and HLA, so that's really good to see. So it looks like the HLA gene panel is still looking pretty good. For the MTRR gene panel, looks like he's got no risk variants for spina bifida and disorders of intracellular collagen metabolism here, but he's got 2 risk variants here. For CBS panel, looks like he's got some genotypes for increased levels of homocysteine, and overall he actually has a predisposition to elevated homocysteine levels, which was sort of what I predicted. He's still scoring higher for intermediate homocysteine levels than elevated, but like elevated is much higher here than lower. For example, if you compare the percentages here, the red occupies a much greater space than the than the green. 37% for elevated and only 18% for lower. So there's definitely a predisposition to elevated homocysteine levels here. And that is because of the MTHFR genotypes and because of all these genotypes in the CBS panel that have to do with homocysteine levels. So that's definitely quite unfortunate. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, looks like no risk variance for muscular dystrophy myopathies, no risk variance for ADL. For color blindness panel, no risk variance for color blindness. For FTO gene panel, definitely no genotypes for obesity and FTO, which is really good to see. Um, he does have some genotypes for higher BMI here that are outside of the FTO gene, which is okay, but in the FTO gene itself, there's pretty much no genotypes for obesity, which is really good to see. And for the biotraits panel, let's go over that a little bit right now. Looks like they've got one copy of the hunter-gatherer CLT-CL1 gene variant and one copy of the farmer variant, which leads to intermediate ability to process carbs and sugars, and the farmer allele is C. For the vitamins and levels panel, should I even talk about this, to be honest? They got a genotype for slightly higher LDL cholesterol. They got a genotype for lower red blood cell count. They got a genotype for increased blood pressure. But all this contributed to the biomarkers panel, which we already looked at. So to be honest, I don't know if I really should talk about this. They have a genotype for lower levels of vitamin K, genotype for higher typical levels of vitamin K, lower levels of vitamin E, intermediate levels of vitamin A or retinol, intermediate levels of vitamin B6, and genotype for intermediate levels of vitamin B12. They have this genotype which leads to intermediate or lower protection of neurons against glutamate toxicity, which is definitely quite interesting. And finally, for the blood group panel, they have definitely a very interesting blood type. Their predicted blood type is actually type A at 67.9%, so it's pretty much 68% likelihood of type A and 22.4% likelihood of type AB, which is super, super uncommon, super rare. I think their blood type is indeed type A, but they are scoring. What's interesting about this result is they have this genotype in this variation, which means they have two alleles for cis AB blood type, and cis AB blood type here is much more likely. And they actually have quite a lot of genotypes that predispose them to having blood type AB, and it's very difficult to predict with this type of genotype if they really have blood type A or AB, because there's some predisposition to both. So my program has a hard time distinguishing, do they have blood type A or is it blood type AB, like which one is it. Just looking at these genotypes, the fact that they have two alleles for cis AB blood type here makes me think they might actually have AB. They have a genotype, hold on, they have a genotype here which corresponds to likely blood type AB, which is a really high accuracy as well, which makes me think also they might have blood type AB. So I'm thinking this might be a case where my trait predictor actually kind of was inaccurate and inaccurately predicted the person to have blood type A when it's AB in reality. But I'm not sure, because there's some other genotypes where the person doesn't have a typical genotype for AB. For example, here GG here is predictive of not having AB. So I mean, it's not very cut and dry. It's very difficult to predict, and it might be A, it might be AB. It's kind of difficult to predict. It's definitely not O. It's probably not B. So it's really either A or AB. It's kind of difficult to predict once again. Well, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Definitely comment down what you thought about the sample. Comment what you think that might be the blood type of the sample. Maybe you have some insights that you want to share. Maybe comment suggestions what other sample you want me to do. Maybe redo some other old sample that I've done previously. Maybe I did it before I developed Trait Predictor, and you might want to see it with Trait Predictor now. Okay. By the way, you can buy the executable. I'm mentioning this in every video, but you can actually buy the executable for Trait Predictor from the link which is in the description of the video. Read the description. The description is going to have the link to the executable, which is costing $25 on each. You can buy it and you can generate these reports for yourself for any raw DNA file. If you don't have $25 to buy the executable, which allows you to generate infinite reports, you can buy a single report for $4 from me. The link to that is also going to be in the description of the video as well. So pretty much just check the description of the video. All the relevant links are going to be there. The link to download the raw DNA file that I was analyzing in this video will also be in the description of the video. So all the links will be there. Check it out. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. Goodbye.